The nation mourns the loss of its former Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who died at the age of 92 in New Delhi on Thursday. Dr. Manmohan Singh, India's former Prime Minister, leaves behind a profound legacy that resonates on the global stage. His contributions transformed not only India's economy, but also its standing in international relations. As the architect of India's economic liberalization in 1991, Dr. Singh dismantled the license Raj, paving the way for foreign investment and competition in India. Under his leadership, India emerged as one of the world's fastest growing economies, with GDP growth averaging around 8% during his tenure from the years of 2004 to 2014. His policies lifted millions out of poverty and expanded the middle class, showcasing India's potential as a global economic powerhouse. Dr. Singh's tenure was marked by significant global partnerships. The landmark Indo-US Civil Nuclear Agreement of 2008 ended India's nuclear isolation and facilitated civilian nuclear cooperation, strengthening ties between two major democracies. His diplomatic efforts extended to enhancing relationships with Russia, Japan, and other nations, establishing India as a key player in international affairs. Moreover, Dr. Singh's commitment to inclusive development was evident through initiatives like the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act and the National Food Security Act, ensuring that economic growth reached the most vulnerable sections of society. As we reflect on his contributions, world leaders have expressed their condolences and admiration for his role in shaping modern India. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, highlighted Dr. Singh as a champion of the US-India strategic partnership, emphasizing how his leadership laid the groundwork for decades of collaboration. Mr. Manmohan Singh's legacy is one of transformative economic policy, strategic diplomacy, and a commitment to social equity that will continue to inspire future generations. His passing marks the end of an era, but his impact on India and the world will be felt for years to come.
राज्यसभा में उनका कार्यकाल समाप्त हुआ, तब मैंने कहा था कि सांसद के रूप में डॉक्टर साहब की निष्ठा सभी के लिए प्रेरणा जैसी है। सत्र के समय अहम मौकों पर वो व्हीलचेयर पर बैठकर आते थे, अपना संसदीय दायित्व निभाते थे। दुनिया के प्रतिष्ठित संस्थानों की शिक्षा लेने और सरकार के अनेक शीर्ष पदों पर रहने के बाद भी वो अपनी सामान्य पृष्ठभूमि के मूल्यों को कभी भी नहीं भूले। दलगत राजनीति से ऊपर उठकर उन्होंने हमेशा हर दल के व्यक्ति से संपर्क रखा, सबके लिए सहज उपलब्ध रहे। जब मैं मुख्यमंत्री था तब डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी के साथ राष्ट्रीय और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय अनेक विषयों पर उनसे खुले मन से चर्चाएं होती थी। यहां दिल्ली आने के बाद भी मेरी उनसे समय समय पर बात होती थी, मुलाकात होती थी। मुझे उनसे हुई मुलाकातें, देश को लेकर हुई चर्चाएं हमेशा याद रहेगी। अभी जब उनका जन्मदिन था तब भी मैंने उनसे बात की थी। आज इस कठिन घड़ी में मैं उनके परिवार के प्रति अपनी संवेदनाएं व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी को सभी देशवासियों की तरफ से श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं।
As a senior statesman and renowned economist in India, Mr. Manmohan Singh had made positive contributions to the development of China-India relations. During his tenure as Prime Minister, China and India announced the establishment of a strategic cooperative partnership for peace and prosperity and reached an agreement on the political guiding principles for the settlement of the border issue. China expresses deep condolences on his death and sincere condolences to the Indian government and people as well as the family of Mr. Singh.
And now we have Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the US, and Robinder Sachdev, president, the Image India Institute and Foreign Affairs expert, joining us on Global Lens here on News9. Thank you so much to both of you. Let me begin with Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ambassador Meera Shankar, yes, the moment you say the term, the word name, Dr. Manmohan Singh, the first thoughts of anybody is what he did with the economy and what an economist he was. But the fact of the matter is that he was an instrumental figure in changing India's relationship with the world.
Absolutely. And I think we have to see the two as a part of a unified strategy to enable India to rise above its poverty and become a leading power in the world. So his foreign policy was very much designed to actually support the economic and technological development of India and the process of lifting people out of social poverty and economic poverty. And for this, you see, he sought good relations with all the major powers. With the US, he changed the paradigm of the relationship with the India-US nuclear deal. Though it didn't really lead to much civil nuclear cooperation between the two countries, what it did was that it actually ended an issue which had plagued the relationship and prevented it from reaching its potential. Also, India was able to import natural uranium and many other nuclear-related equipment from other countries after the waiver given by the Nuclear Suppliers Group. But he also built very good relations with Japan, recognizing that it could be a major partner in India's development, and also with Russia, with which we had long-standing strategic ties. If you look at the neighborhood, he basically tried to ensure an atmosphere of peace and stability, so that India could focus on what he saw as its primary objective, and that was economic and social development and the realization of India's national goals. And he was right, because if you take a look even at China, the years that it was growing very rapidly and taking strides to reach where it is today, it basically adopted, the whole policy of the peaceful rise of China. It's a different matter that that policy has been abandoned now that China feels it has arrived and it no longer needs to be conciliatory in its approach to its neighborhood, but more to assert power. So I think Dr. Manmohan Singh realized that this was of the essence for India for the next 2 to 3 decades as we focused on the national development goals.
Robinder Sachdev, in that sense, he was a master at striking that balance when it comes to foreign affairs, be it having the right relationship with China and Russia, or with the US and the Western world.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, he was a master at that. But before going into that, I would just step back and say that, his passing is truly the passing of an era. He was of an age 92 or so, born 1932 in erstwhile British India, migrated the family, partition and stuff like that, right? So it's the passing of, and of course, I mean, he is, let's say, he was the age of my parents, right? This era, this generation is passing away, one. So the background he came from, Pakistan, then India, a refugee, partition, whichever way, struggled, made his path. So in the one big picture, I would say it's a passing of an era truly in that sense. Secondly, in terms of what he did, etc. Yes, multiple things, but as Ambassador Shankar was mentioning, we can spend hours and hours on this topic, but perhaps to my mind, the apex of his, one was the US-India civil nuclear deal. Of course, one earlier, his milestone achievement as a technocrat. Remember, he was the first technocrat prime minister of India. He was the first Sikh prime minister of India, also, which speaks highly, truly, and celebrates India's diversity and our democracy. Uh, so, one was the 90s liberalization, which set India on a certain path of economic, rejuvenation. And then back later, when he assumed the prime ministership, his focus on, amongst everything else, yes, Russia, Japan, and remember, he was a global personality in some senses also, right? Of globalization. Taking that forward, the US India nuclear deal was something which is a milestone, not only in his career, I would say, in the relations between US and India. As Ambassador Shankar said, you know, prior to the nuclear deal with US and India, we had a huge deficit of trust. India
Right.
US relations would not today be where they are if it were not work for the work of ambassadors like Ambassador Meera Shankar and their
Right.
and their and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who bet his government on this deal, this relation. And in the 1950s, by the way, the US and India, we got, nuclear reactors via Canada in a program of Eisenhower known as Atoms for Peace. What this deal was actually was atoms for peace and trust. Yes, American companies, especially GE and Westinghouse, were looking to sell their reactors in India. And that's how, I was involved in this pretty intensely in Washington, D.C., our lobby group. So in the US, you had to sell the deal as a deal which is good for America. And the deal good for America was countering China, availability of a huge Indian market, and business for American nuclear industry. Sure, the business for American nuclear industry did not pan out for various reasons. We can go into that. But the point was the deal had to be seen good there and the deal had to be seen good here. And Manmohan Singh really walked that path. He tiptoed and he wagered his government on that. I remember we met, those were times I was in the US, we had a lobby group, we would reach out to US congressmen. And by the way, I would add one element. We have a sense in India that always, let's say, certain sections or lobbies or interest groups are helpful to India. I'll give you a contra example. The Jewish lobby in the US worked against the interests of India in the US India nuclear deal. I personally had meetings with Tom Lantos, who was the chair of the House International Relations Committee. And the, the deal he held out, he said, you guys convey to the government of India that it should step back from its cooperation with Iran. If the government of India does that, then our lobby, quote unquote, the Jewish lobby, would support the deal, else we will kill this deal. So there were various games going on behind the happening and making of this deal. But the fact that Dr. Manmohan Singh held steadfast to it and wagered his, his prime ministership on it, I think, sure, he was a soft guy, perception-wise, soft-spoken and all, but maybe that was his moment of, steely resolve, but that was really a moment when he stood up for what he believed in. And today, I again repeat, our relations with America would nowhere be where they are.
Right.
That deal had not happened then.
Right. One is his work in terms of the Indo-US relationship, and the other is, during his tenure, many groupings that India became part of, like the Quad, like BRICS, these were crucial landmark groupings that that happened under in the tenure of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and they changed things for India globally, wasn't it, Ambassador?
Yes, absolutely. He uh, understood what I would call the variable geometry of international cooperation. So, becoming simultaneously a part of different groupings. First, there was, BRIC, BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Then it became BRICS with the joining of South Africa. There was the Quad, Australia, India, Japan, the US on the other side. There was the Russia, India, China trilateral. There were so many of these groups which India became a part of. And therefore, we were able to get perspectives from different regions and different viewpoints and try to play a role in shaping some of those. And I think this international participation in multiple groupings has provided India with flexibility at a time when the global scene is very volatile, where the old order no longer prevails in the way it used to, and a new order is still to be born. So it's a period of uncertainty, and this partnership in multiple groupings, I think, gives India the flexibility at this very delicate stage of international relations. I would say that India was very fortunate to have Dr. Manmohan Singh because he had a dispassionate interest in the exercise of leadership for the betterment of the country. It was not a desire for power, not a desire for power's sake, which is what is the norm in politics, if I may say so. But he was more in the nature of Plato's philosopher king or philosopher ruler, who is looking to use his scholarship, his understanding of issues to see how he can take the country forward. So a long-term vision, an ability to play strategically, and a soft conciliatory exterior, but the ability to stand firm on issues which mattered.
Ability to stand firm on issues that matter. If you look at his legacy, Dr. Singh's legacy, Ambassador, the one thing that stands out is that he, in fact, used economics as a tool to build relationships across the world. I mean, his focus was not just on the US, or was not just on Russia and China, Latin America, African nations, all of which, he wanted to develop India as an economic power and build bridges with the world with that.
I think he understood that when you're talking of comprehensive national strength, and it can't just be military strength, it has to be, your social cohesiveness, it has to be the rapidity of growth in your economy, it has to be some degree of social development so that everybody achieves a basic standard of living. And it has to be your ability for technological innovation, along with your military capacities, along with your population. So he understood that it is a comprehensive power which enables a country to grow. And at the base of it, really at the core of it, is a company's economic and technological strength. And that is what he gave primacy to. And all his policies were really designed to build support for this. If you look at India's exposure to the world, even today, in terms of trade and investment, outgoing trade and investment from India, it's still far from what it should be. It's very small. Trade, less than 2% of global trade. And so it's something which he understood, that power remains rhetoric unless it is backed by economic strength and enhanced economic interaction across the globe.
Just want to also, hear your thoughts on his work when it comes to the India-China relationship, the other important relationship apart from the India-US relationship. That was also a major achievement, in his tenure of 10 years as Prime Minister. The way he was able to, strike that balance in that relationship with China, which is complex because we have everything from border disputes to trade disputes with China, and it's difficult and extremely near impossible to strike the right balance in that relationship.
Yes, he always emphasized that the world is large enough to have two major economies like India and China growing simultaneously. And if they continue to grow together at a very rapid pace, then they can in future become engines actually providing momentum to the global economy. His relationship with China was one where he sought to manage differences and build on areas of possible cooperation, recognizing that at least in the international arena, there was much that India and China could do together to help developing countries and to present the developing country perspective on important issues such as climate change, trade openings, investment, health, dealing with pandemics, and so on. And he also understood that dealing with China economically might be beneficial for stability in India and stability in Asia. But I would say on this score, there is a question mark still because the trade with China has become very unbalanced at the moment. And there's a huge trade deficit which India has. Cheap imports also have actually undermined India's own small and medium industries, which have not been able to stand up to the competition from China. So this is a dilemma most countries around the world face. It's not just an Indian dilemma, because China has created these huge overcapacities well beyond its ability to absorb domestically. And it exports quite often at below production prices. So this unfair competition is something I think we still have to come to grips with. But I'm sure Dr. Singh would also have looked at ways to balance this had he been there at a time when this was so visible.
Right, Ambassador Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the US, there joining us here on Global. And thank you so much, ma'am, for taking time out to be with us. Robinder, let me bring this to you now. It was not just about China, it was about the entire neighborhood as far as Dr. Manmohan Singh's legacy is concerned, the kind of relationship that he built between India and all of its neighbors, and the way he was able to maintain those relationships as well.
No, thank you so much. Listening to Ambassador Meera Shankar's view, and I mean, she gave a very lucid, analysis. And I was especially struck by the term that she used, variable geometry. I mean, and by the way, I have a model on that, so I'll try and show to you and your viewers that the world of today is a matrix under construction. It's a variable geometry, right? Now, this variable geometry, yes, talking with respect to our neighbors, yes, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and our foreign policy always tries and have tried and worked. But there has been one consistent pattern in our neighborhood. One government, let's say in our surrounding areas, you have, forget Pakistan, you have Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives. Let's say these are 4 or 5 countries. When one government comes in power, they're pro-India, they tilt to India, and they reduce their linkages or their geometry with China. One party loses power, the next party comes, the next party improves their geometry with China, reduces their geometry with India. That has been the pattern in our neighborhood ever since the last 30, 40 odd years. And one reason for that maybe is that, you see, we are the big guy in the neighborhood. And sure, these countries are small, so the issues of, big brother, small brother, and multiple other ideological ones. So Prime Minister Manmohan Singh tackled with them to the best, as Modi ji is doing right now in these scenarios. I'll come back still to the biggest game changer, I think, which Manmohan Singh enabled for India, if in terms of big ideas, is the US India Civil Nuclear Accord. There was opposition within India, within the coalition government that brought him to power. I mean, he was the prime minister with support from the communist bloc. They said, we will not support this deal. The BJP then totally opposed the deal. And he went ahead on his conviction. Now, couple of things helped on that, I would think. One was early 2000s and onwards, India's economy was on a good uptick, right? And has still always been. We were a bullock cart economy, let's say last 50, 60 years. But in the last 20, 30 years, we've become a kind of a galloping horse, one. Second, Y2K, maybe many of you viewers will remember, that's what gave India a real break in terms of IT industry and IT cooperation between the US and India. Y2K, just to remind, was supposed to be the 31st December of 1999, when all computer systems would crash, all air traffic systems would crash, all banking would crash, because the computer systems were not programmed to the date. Now, India stepped in, or not India, Indian private enterprises, nothing to do with government of India. They stepped in to recodify these codes for American banks, especially, and governments worldwide who were worried about what would happen the day after. That became a success, and thankfully, Y2K did not bring the world to an end. What that did, it brought confidence in American companies, in technology companies, that they could work long distance with Indian low cost labor to address their, let's say, business interests. And then in stepped the Indian American community. Many of the Indian American entrepreneurs by then were starting out, right? They made their little earnings and all, and India was suddenly a growing, galloping horse to engage in. So the Indian American community technology folks started to set up or establish their back-end bases. Remember the age of the call centers and BPOs, etc., employing. So that started the momentum out there. Now, along came Bush, George, and Condi Rice. I would actually accord Condoleezza Rice her due for pushing the US-India relation. Sure, America looked at it, any country would, from its own self-interest. And the self-interest of America, George Bush, then W, was India a strategic partner with respect to China, India a growing economy, a growing market, a natural ally, a democracy, a English-speaking huge audience,
Right.
to build relations with that. That's what set the foreground, and Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh, I think, carried that forward, was able to convince leaders in India who were doubting it, and also folks on Capitol Hill, for which I also kind of played a role, because we had an Indian American lobby group. We were pursuing the American congressmen,
Right.
why the deal is good for America, etc.
Right.
So that was, I think, to my mind, a barrier which broke, or a dam that broke America-India cooperation. Today's date, America-India cooperation would nowhere be where it is right now if that deal
Absolutely.
had not happened.
That would go down as one of the greatest
Yeah.
achievements of Dr. Singh, and one of the highlights of Dr. Singh's legacy.